go ahead and start to get to know the speakers that we have joining us here today and begin our presentation. So we have a series of 3 different participants who will be sharing their expertise with you today. We have 2 college and university counselors and consultants who are here on the call with us, and you're going to be able to interact with them, ask them questions, get to know a little bit of their expertise. And then we also have a really fascinating, and I mean, you're just going to love it, video with Judith Hodara that is going to be shared with you in the chat. It's a full 19-minute long video where she gives you all of the tricks of the trade from her experience. And so that's going to be a video. If you haven't been able to see all of it by the time we finish the webinar today, you're going to want to follow up with that after the fact. We're going to be starting out our event with a really interesting conversation with Eli David. Eli is a founder of Ivy MBA Consulting. And following 5 years of military service as an officer with the Israeli Air Force, Eli moved to Paris, where he studied at the Sorbonne and Paris School of Business. Following graduation, he joined a private equity research team at INSEAD. He then moved to the US and completed his MBA at Dartmouth College, and upon graduation joined a New York-based management consulting firm and advised companies such as American Express and Goldman Sachs. During his studies, Eli gained vast knowledge about the admission process and co-founded Ivy MBA Consulting. In that work, he's helped over 700 applicants gain admissions to top programs around the world since that time. And we're very fortunate to have him as a parent here at UWC Thailand with his 4 children attending our school. After Eli speaks and we hear a little bit of the video, you're going to be able to have a very interesting and profound experience with our university counselor and school counselor here at UWC Thailand, Len Peters. Len joined UWC Thailand the first time in 2009 when the school was Phuket International Academy. He returned in 2014 as the first school counselor for the school when we had just started the IB diploma program. Len's previous experience working in education includes public schools in the United States and international schools in the UK and India. Len has a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's in school counseling, and he's worked in international education for 24 plus years now, including working in university admissions with high school students for about 12 years. Len feels strongly about the comprehensive school counseling model where the counselor supports the students' well-being and mental health and their post-secondary education pathways, and also feels strongly that that's a best fit for our students here at UWC Thailand. In between hearing from Eli David and Len Peters, you're going to get a little clip of Judith Hodara. And as I've said, the link to that full video will go into the chat and in a follow-up email that we send to you after today's webinar. Judith is an amazing bonus to have with us here on the call. Excuse me. She is the Fortuna Admissions co-founder and director and former acting director and senior associate of MBA Admissions at the Wharton School. Within the field of university admissions, there really are few industry leaders who have more experience than Judith Silverman Hodara. She was a core member to the admissions teams at the University of Pennsylvania for nearly 2 decades. She started with almost a decade of recruiting, both domestically and internationally, as an associate director of admissions for Penn, and then later was the leading admissions committee at Wharton School's MBA program, where she reviewed thousands of applications and traveled extensively to meet with prospective students throughout Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Judith has also served as the Director of Academic Affairs for the Rothberg School of International Studies at Hebrew University. She holds an EDD from the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education and Higher Education Management and is a frequent contributor to the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, Business Week, and Poets and Quants. So without further ado, I would like to invite our keynote speaker, Eli David, to begin his talk with you all and invite you all to enjoy. As Eli and the rest of our speakers are sharing, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to pop those into the chat. We have a Q&A session at the end of the time with our speakers, and we're happy to address your questions at that time. Welcome, Eli.
Thank you, Laurel, for the introduction and for having me here. I'm very happy to share some of my experience with everyone here. And I actually wanted to start with a personal story from applying to graduate program myself. I believe that this story holds one of the most important messages for anyone who is considering applying to college or university in the next few years. So I take you back to 2005 when I was still living in Paris, and I started the application process. And needless to say, this was very intense, working on the exams and the essays and everything. I applied to several programs in the top 15 and was admitted to 4. So Duke was the first one that admitted me, but I really wanted to study at Dartmouth College. It was in top of all the rankings, Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Business Week. And this is something I was passionate about. I was impressed by their career statistics post-graduation. And I knew that if I'm admitted to Dartmouth, that's where I'll go. And when the good news came from Dartmouth, I immediately said yes. Now you need to understand that Dartmouth is a very small college town in a remote area in the middle of north of New Hampshire, 2.5 hours to the nearest city. And if you look at my life before joining Dartmouth, I was living mostly in big cities, in Tel Aviv, in Paris. I spent many months in Amsterdam, Barcelona, and Sydney, Australia. So I knew Dartmouth would be very different, but I also really believe that for a brand, I would need to compromise. So after a very long flight and an even longer train ride and yet another long car ride, I arrived to Hanover, New Hampshire, where Dartmouth is. And it was August, but at the end of August, it's already freezing cold in the evenings over there. And, despite an initial shock of not seeing anyone in the streets, because again, it's such a small place and it's cold. So most of the time the streets are empty. I was happy to start studying. And in the first few days, when I met my classmates, I realized that there was very little diversity in the student body. And, I looked around and I almost didn't see international students. And, we were a class of 267 students and there were only 3 African-American students. And, everyone kind of looked the same. And when I dove in even deeper, it was, I realized that almost everyone comes from New England. So it was very weird for me, but, I carried on throughout those 2 years. I gained a lot from my education at Dartmouth, but I have to be very honest. If I want to be honest with myself and with everyone who asked me, I would today make a bit of a different decision. I would make a deeper research into the schools that I was admitted to and probably choose another one that had a better fit for who I am and what I'm looking for. And today in a culture of brands, it's easy to make this mistake and get blinded. But if there is one thing I want everyone to take from my part today, is that a good fit is much more important than the brand. And when we're talking about fit, we're talking about a few different things, but I want to talk about some of the softer ones. We can talk about the level of academics. So the last thing you want to do is to struggle throughout the 4 years of university. Make sure that you're somewhere, not in the bottom 20%. And even if you struggle to get into a school that above your academic capabilities, think carefully before you make this commitment. Location of the school is extremely important. Some schools are in big cities. Some schools are in small towns. Each of those schools would provide a very different experience, and you need to be aware of that. The diversity of the student body is extremely important as well. Some schools are more diverse than others, and if this is something that is important for you, you want to take this into consideration. Same for class size. Some schools have huge classes where on one hand you can get lost, but also you have a lot of choices, where other schools are very small ones. And they aim for a small, tight community, but if you're not the perfect fit, then you can feel pretty much alone throughout 4 years, and that's not something you want. Overall, I'm aiming for always tell my people, go and visit the schools. This is the most important tip. Before you start the process, before you commit, go and visit the school, make sure you have this full, feel good vibe from the school. Now, I know that we are here also because most of you are aiming high and you want to fulfill full potential for the kids. And I do want to give you the, my 2 cents on what is the most important thing to focus on now. And the fact that we are talking now enough time before the process is your biggest advantage, because time is a scarce resource when we're talking about the admissions process. So when we look at the admissions funnel, you see many applicants coming in, and then there is, admissions committee would start screening. And I would simplify it by saying that the initial screening would be based on hard data, grades, the numbers, ACTs, SATs, academic focus. It is the easiest way for schools to screen this way and, find who is the best match for them on an academic level. Having said that, you need to know that many more students apply nowadays with higher grades, more than ever before. Definitely much more than what schools could actually admit. So this is where the personal story kicks in. Basically, you need to imagine that strong academics or strong academic success will put you in the right pile, but it's the story that will get you admitted. That's a message I want you to also take away. When we talk about a personal story, you hear a lot the term well-rounded, holistic applicants, which I'm sure it will address later on, but I wanted to talk about a different key factor in the process. And this key factor is standing out. Think of admission officers reading dozens of applications every day. Your sole objective as applicants would be to be remembered at the end of the day. And when I'm talking about standing out, what do I mean by that? How will an applicant stand out? So some will stand out just by being who they are through family background, or a special story in their life. If you're a refugee, then you have an advantage. If you come from a very small and remote place with no chance for a good education, you'd be a good candidate. Of course, assuming a strong academic background. If your parents, for example, are from 2 different enemy countries, this is a great story for the admissions committee. Or even if you struggled with a health condition and overcame it, then it's a good story for the admissions. But all of us, most of us won't have that. Those are rare cases. And most of us will have to stand out through actions that we're taking. Parents often come to me and they say that the kids are doing music and they're doing debate and they won the science fair and they're doing beach cleaning and they're playing football. This is all great, but when I ask them about the story, what's the story, what's the main message of the kid, then it's more challenging for them to answer. And this is something I can recommend from doing what I'm doing for 15 years. I'm not objecting to doing many things in parallel, but I do have a preference to someone who, takes a much deeper dive into something that they are passionate about and experience it to the fullest. So if you're into music, if you learn guitar, take it an extra level. Try to form a group, a band. Try to record something. Perform somewhere in a street, in a nice place, where you can experience playing outside. Do unique things with music. You can volunteer through music. You can teach music. This would, give a much more compelling message to the admissions committee. If you're into the environment, it's great to clean beaches, but do much more. Maybe initiate fundraise, maybe join an NGO that does environment. All those kind of things would basically help you or enable you to convey a much more compelling story to the admissions committee. The last message that I have is more about UWC and what is the advantage of being here in the context of our topic. I personally first learned about the UWC movement when I helped clients who studied at different UWC campuses go to leading schools. they were so much more diverse, interesting, and this put UWC on my map a while ago. You know, of course, after my Dartmouth experience, I made sure to visit all the schools on the island. And I talked to many people and many teachers and had many meetings before I decided to go to choose UWC. But, you know, opening the doors for my kids was also important. It wasn't the first or second thing, but it was very important. And I wanted to give them for them to have a choice, if they prefer, to go to one of the top schools. And when I started researching UWC in that context, I was amazed to see how many UWC students are represented in the different schools out there. So, you know, if I'm looking at just 3 Ivy League schools, I was, you know, again, amazed to see that in several years, 20% of the international students at Brown University, a very famous Ivy League school, were from UWC campuses. Same for Princeton. Now at Princeton, there are 100 students from UWC campuses around the world. This is a record number, which you just don't see from any other group of schools. Same Harvard. Harvard is more competitive. We had 5% of the international students coming from UWC. Those are big numbers. And I knew that if I ever wanted my kids to go to a good university, then UWC would be an amazing springboard to do that. Throughout the process of choosing a school for my kids, I also spoke to many friends in the admissions committee. And one of them is as Lural mentioned, is Judith Hodara, who's really a great person. And she has agreed to share her experience with us. So I think I'm going to move, I'm going to let Lural introduce her now.
Thank you so much, Ellie. It's really interesting to hear your perspectives. And I've got a couple of questions I've jotted down that maybe we can jump to along with the other questions we'll receive after we hear from Judith and Len. But such a fascinating thing to hear your experiences and kind of that journey, as you've discussed, that one would take, kind of considering what is the right fit. And I do have a really great clip from Judith Hodara. And again, for our listeners on the webinar today, the full clip will be added into the chat and sent in the email after our session today. So you're going to be able to watch the full 19 minutes of the conversation between Ellie David and Len Peters with Judith, who worked in admissions at Wharton and UPenn and has a really interesting view of UWC candidates as an admissions professional. How are they viewed? Apologies there for the technical difficulties. As our tech individual in the background helps to look at that, maybe we'll jump over to Len and we can pull up Judith's clip on UWC admissions after that. So joining us on the call, we have Len Peters, who's going to appear on your screen right now. And he has actually a couple of students with him as well. Len, I know that you have some observations to share with us regarding your experiences as a comprehensive counselor working with both well-being and university counseling here at UWC Thailand. And I'm excited to see a couple of our wonderful students sitting there with you. I'm sure we're all eager to hear their perspectives as well on the university experience whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to be with you this afternoon. Before we start, I'd just like to introduce 2 of our students. If you could just introduce yourself, say where you're from.
Hi, everybody. I'm Garn and I'm from Thailand.
And hi, everybody. I'm Christy and I'm from China.
Could you hear that okay? Okay. As Eli talked about, one of the challenges that our students really face is fit. And they have many questions they have to consider. It's not like in some schools, if you're in the UK or the US, you're just thinking about applying to the US or the UK. Here are some of the questions we ask are, what do you want to study? Many students don't know what they want to study yet. And that's fine for some school systems. For some, it's not. Which country do they think they might want to go to? It's often challenging, and we'll hear from Christy in a minute that she's applied to several countries. A difficult conversation sometimes for some of our students is to have this conversation with their parents. Money. How much can you afford to contribute to your child's education? And often that's the first time the student and their parents will have a conversation about finances. It's quite an interesting conversation. And for some of our students, particularly from the NC, some of them have very modest socioeconomic background. It's often a very emotional discussion. And that what Laurel alluded to, being a social emotional counselor as well as university counselor, it's very helpful for me, and I hope for the students, that that combination works for them. Just this afternoon, I was speaking with a 10th grade student, and they were saying, you know, they applied, they got to the school, and they're saying, now what? And often when students ask that question, or ask, you know, what am I going to do, or, you know, what career am I going to ask, or what career am I going to follow? We kind of turn that around a bit. And the question I often ask is, imagine 10 years from now, you've finished with UWC, you've finished with university. What kind of problem or issue that you see in the world or topic would you like to be working on? Rather than what career do you want to follow, because it's hard to know what that career is. What do you want to see yourself doing in some years? What problem would you like to be working on? And some of the ways we try to help students understand possible career paths, in the SEL curriculum, we talk about various aspects of the work life. We have a group called PACE, which is a Parent Alumni Career Exploration, where we have events. We used to have them quite frequently, but COVID put a damper on it for a bit. But we have guest speakers come in, and students go and talk with them. Family members, parents from the community, or other community members talk about their very circuitous route to where they are now. One of the aspects of thinking about what you want to do, there's a concept we've worked on with students called Ikigai. And Ikigai is a Japanese concept trying to find what you love, what the world needs, what you can actually make a living at, and what you're good at. And you can see many people may be good at something and they may love it, but they can't make a living. Or maybe they're very good at something, but the world doesn't actually need it. But if you can get those four concepts together, the Japanese precept is that it's an ikigai. You've done something that meets those four capabilities or needs, and it's very fulfilling. For me, as an educator, and I think many educators would agree, that fits that. Our process starts about in grade 10, when we start thinking about what the grade 10 students are going to sign up for in the DP, because the courses you choose matter. We have a fairly comprehensive timeline. We introduced something called Sialpha, which is our web-based platform for managing the applications. There's various processes we meet. We have lessons with the students, and I meet with every student individually to try to support their application. I'd like to turn now to Garn and Christy, and could you just each say where you ended up applying and why a bit?
So I early decisioned to Williams College in Massachusetts, and one of the primary reasons was that it was a liberal arts program. I have a passion for economics. However, at the same time, I feel like I'm very nervous to commit myself to something about actually like trying it. Even if I'm taking IB Economics HL, I feel like at a university's level, that would be different. So having an open curriculum and being in a liberal arts program where I don't have to decide my major until like my junior or sophomore year is like very reassuring for me.
Yeah, and I am applying the school in England through UPass, and also Singapore, Hong Kong, and Canada. And for me, it's like since young age, I know my passion is on accounting and finance, and I also take business management and also econ through my learning years. So I really want to go to those universities that I chose that have good business department, and also have a lot of opportunities for me to get internship during summer.
What would you say was, for the last couple of years being here, and Garn, you've been here since when?
Since I was in kindergarten.
It's been here a long time. I met him in 2009, so it's amazing. In this, particularly the last, couple of years of this DP, what's been the most challenging part of trying to figure out of the whole application process? What do you think was most challenging?
So for me, it's about writing personal statement for different schools. They are like 4 individual systems. So there's a lot of different questions. But for me, I need to focus on academic part and like how can I express myself that is like real me and why I have passion on the subject I choose. So yeah, like limited word count, but I need to express myself completely.
For me personally, it was expanding my choices and like pivoting myself from starting in Singapore to Australia and then finally the US. So by the time it was time for me to apply to the US, I realized I wanted to early decision. So I feel like although I felt like my application was ready and I was prepared for it, I do wish that I had some more time to do research and really like invest myself into the research process and like finding out what the student and academic life is like there, apart from like what they project on their website and webinars, etc.
Yeah, Eli had mentioned that he suggests to his clients to visit the school. Obviously, that's really impossible for most of our students. Christy would love to travel to Canada and Hong Kong and Singapore and the UK, but we can't do that. So it is a huge task for the students to try to get a sense of how they would feel on that campus and in that community. So it does take a lot of research. Most of the students I talk with, at the end of the process, they wish they had spent more time researching, and they wish they had spent more time on their personal statements. As Eli talked about, you have to present yourself. Many students have done the IB, or they've done well in their college or their school. How do they stand out? And now that's a challenge for students to sort of brag about themselves, but be truthful about what they've done. This concept of fit is a challenge both for parents and for students. When I ask a student, often it comes in, I say, where do you want to, have you thought about where you want to go or what country you want to apply to? Often they'll say, I want to apply to the Ivies, or I want to apply to the Russell Group in the UK. And I go, where did you get that name from? My parents. Okay. So I say, okay, how much of that is you want to do that and how much of it is your parents? And sometimes they're very strongly want to do that. And sometimes it's, there's a lot of parent pressure because there's an expectation if you go to Harvard or UCL or LSE, they're going to have a successful life. It's a question. So this concept of fit is really important, that not every student here is going to get a 45, right? It's not going to happen. Each student will do the best they can possibly do, and that's our goal. What's the best you can do? Have you achieved the best you can do? Based on that, some students would thrive in a very rigorously academic school. Some students that are going to Harvard would not be well, as Eli acknowledged when he was at Dartmouth. It just wasn't a good fit for him. So this concept of fit is a process that takes quite a bit of time to get through. And fortunately, over the last few years, most of the students have told us that they have found a university that's worked for them and they're quite okay. Yeah, maybe I can stop there and see if there's some questions we'd like to speak to, or if you'd like to ask one of the students something, I'm happy to respond.
Yeah, thank you so much, Len. And I see that George, who's joining us from Kerala, India, has asked in the chat how he might be able to promote the students that he works with through, I'm assuming assuming for their higher studies. So what are the options kind of for entry into a UWC, I'm assuming, or George, if you want to jump in, if I'm misstating your question to help me out with the intention, go for it. So there's multiple entry pathways into UWCs around the world. UWC Thailand is a through school, which is why one of our students there has been with us for so long, which is a wonderful thing. And then we have other students who join us later on in the process, specifically in grade 11, through a selection process that is quite competitive around the world. And so I think there's a lot of parents, as Ellie explained regarding his own decisions, who look into the UWC value from an early age. Ellie's 4 children are still quite young, but he's made that choice from an early age to give them that opportunity. I do think it's quite an interesting thing, kind of the differentiating factor between attending a non-UWC and attending a UWC. Len, as far as university acceptance and scholarship specifically, can you explain a little bit more where that difference lies?
Okay. We have Normally we have universities admission reps come and visit the campuses. It's changed this last couple of years because of COVID. So this past year, we did online sessions with universities from around the world. One of the things that comes out of every talk I had with an admissions rep is how much they appreciate the UWC students. The UWC mission, the intent of the school, yes, it has a base of the IB curriculum. It does, all the 6 courses, the theory of knowledge, the extended essay, CAS, but there's something different they find about the UWC students that makes them a better fit for university. And by fit means they will succeed at university and graduate. Some level of universities are businesses. They need to have students come in, contribute to the community, learn and graduate. And we try to find out what is it that makes these students different? What is it that allows them to be desired by the universities? Part of it is the rigor of the curriculum they've gone through. A part of it is the intentional international setting they're in. How many nationalities in grade 12? Grade in DP, say,
A lot.
It's about 40 different nationalities. So you imagine, within our 95 or 100 students, you have 40 different nationalities living together, learning together, having different perspectives, being challenged, being asked to consider their perspectives or their concept of the world. It's very rich. And as I watch students come in, I watch Garn grow. Garn is an amazingly articulate person. You ask a question, there's a pause, there's a thoughtful response. It's a remarkable capacity that the university reps say they really appreciate. Plus, they all do so much more than just in academics. They're doing service, they're working with the gibbons, they're working in the elephant sanctuary, they're working for an older people's home, they're doing service projects on campus, they're working with the younger students in the school. And I think it relates back to what Eli was talking about, what the college is for. Well, there are lots of students who do really well at high school. What else, what are they looking for? They're looking for students who are going to contribute to the community, who are going to participate in the various clubs, the activities. They're looking for students who would do well in the academic program. And there's a program in the United States called the Davis Scholarship. Shelby Davis was very keen to have more international students, more diverse students in the United States colleges. She created a fund called the Davis Scholarship Program. And it provides scholarship to students who have need. It's a need-based scholarship to about 99 schools in the United States. They range from schools you've heard of, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, to schools you probably never heard of, College of the Atlantic or Grinnell or somewhere. And the amazing part of that is for many of our NC students who come here who have very modest family background, financially, they can have a free, a fully supported scholarship to 4 years in the United States. And for most international students applying to the US, many schools do not have need-based for international students. They have merit, which is based on your academic profile and your capacity as a student. So having these two combinations of merit for students who don't have financial need and need-based for those students at the great generosity of Shelby Davis is quite a benefit for UWC students applying not just to the US. Shelby is only in the US, but other schools around the world really appreciate UWC. NYU Abu Dhabi in New York, UCL in London, Hong Kong University, Singapore University. They really understand the UWC student and what they're going to bring. So it's quite a benefit, I would say, to students and their families just being in the school in terms of that particular part of next life after UWC.
Yeah, it really is just so unique and so special and a differentiating factor. I mean, I think there's so many wonderful schools out there and part of that key is the support that we give all students. And then if you're lucky enough to be a part of a UWC, there's that additional benefit, which is really wonderful. So I'm wondering for a few of the parents out there, I've got a private question in the chat. Parent a little too shy to ask themselves, but I'll ask on their behalf. If we have parents in our group right now and they're hoping trying to do the very best they can to support their child in successful path toward university, either for Ellie or for Len. Do you have any specific advice on how parents can support their children? Ellie, you look like you want to answer that.
It's always about, as I mentioned, it's always about thinking about, the things that Len presented, and maybe start, the earlier we start thinking about it, we will be ready. And as I said, time is the best resource we can ask for. And starting to kind of digest the things and highlight the things we identify in ourselves that we want to do, the sooner we can dedicate ourselves to them. And as I said, I gave the example or environment, working with animals or working with disadvantaged kids, for example. The more you're engaged to that, the more you're active in a specific area, I think the better your story will be. And of course, don't forget to prioritize the academic and make sure it meets the standards, but you need both of the things to succeed.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I wonder, for our students present, would you be brave enough to perhaps share with us what you have considered in your application process might be your differentiating factors? What are you thinking about when you write those essays that would help you stand out in a crowd?
Well, personally, I find, my personal statement, it was one of the most challenging pieces of writing that I've ever come across, because, being asked to condense your identity and who you are, your entire story, into 650 words is extremely challenging, yet somehow a little bit dehumanizing at the same time, even though you're trying to humanize yourself and make yourself stand out from the other applicants. So for me, it was a very stressful time. I feel like there were so many, significant life experiences that were meaningful and monumental to me that I alluded to. But at the same time, I feel like I couldn't really go into it. And I just basically, as Krulen said, list out my achievements, demonstrate my growth. It just felt like very prescribed and structured. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, good for you. You did it though.
Thank you.
You no? Okay.
And so, Len, I know that you work so hard each year to support students. Can you maybe highlight for us some of the personal statements or applications that have really stood out to you, where you think, oh, wow, this is a kid that's going to stand out in an application pile? What does that look like?
I wouldn't even know where to start. When I feel privileged, actually, because when part of the process of the application is to ask the students to fill out a kind of a background form, both for the teacher recommendations, they get 2 teacher recommendations, and one for me to write the counselor recommendation. And it's a time for them to sort of reflect on their life. The questions are quite pointed and hopefully try to draw out what some of the things that Garn alluded to. And some of those that I read, I read the trajectory of that student's life, what they've gone through, what they've experienced, the way they talk about what they've experienced. I mean, it's an insight into the students that, like I said, I feel privileged, and I feel many of our staff actually don't see that. And I think actually many of the parents don't actually see that part of their child. It's fascinating. And then they write this personal statement, and the personal statement depends on what country. It has certain structure. And there's something called supplemental essays. The more competitive schools, they have to write specific things like, why NYU, or what are you going to bring to the school? Talk about a challenge that you met in your life and how you overcame it. And the stories are unique. Like each student that I get to read their personal statement or their life, I don't think some of them are heartbreaking, frankly, the difficulties they've gone through, the challenges they've had with their family, the divorce, or going through a war-torn country, or just as a young child being bullied and trying to find their way through, or having questions about their gender or their sexuality or their identity. Many of our students are, it's not even a third culture, it's a multicultural child, and wondering, where do I belong? What am I going to do in a world that's in so many problems right now? And they talk about all of these issues. So those stories are fascinating. And the admissions reps tell us that when someone just speaks from their heart, is not trying to pretend to be somebody, is not trying to answer the question that they think the university person wants, they just have their own voice and it's genuine, as I see them, that works. That's all they need to do. And yeah, they're amazing stories. I can't think of.
If I may,
well, I think you said it well when you said that it feels like a privilege. I can imagine that it feels a bit like you're taking a window into the world of a child and the way that they're thinking about themselves. And it's such a pivotal moment, right, in your lives. I mean, for our two students there, this is such a big moment to then be stepping away and potentially to another country. It's, yeah, just a really, really amazing joy and privilege to be a part of that experience in any way whatsoever, be it the parent or the teacher or the counselor or the supportive consultant, as Ellie would be as well. Well, thank you.
I often think about that. I often think about it with the students. It's like for most of them, they're doing it themselves. They may have some parent support, but mostly they're doing it themselves. It's sort of like their first major purchase. They're going to spend somebody's money on 3 or 4 years, and they have to get it right because they're living it. There's no do-over. Maybe some cases, but it's a huge decision. And I feel for them. And in this grade 12, besides doing all the higher level extensions of their subjects and doing their internal assessments, they have to do this thing called apply to college. So now they have 7 courses and all these major decisions. And I don't know how you get through it, frankly.
With incredible support. It seems, with incredible support of each other and from their loved ones, which is really, really wonderful. Well, I do apologize that our technical difficulties didn't allow us to see the videos. Those are going to pop into the chat right now for you. And before you hang up on this call, make sure you click on those videos so that you can have them open in your browser and watch them as we finish today. We've got 2 videos that are going to come into the chat for you. We've got that wonderful interview that Len Peters and Ellie David held with our admissions professional who was supporting their kind of background research, Judith Hodara, who again worked at Wharton and UPenn. I mean, just some really fascinating insights that are not to be missed. So I encourage you to click on that video and watch that. It's not going to be something that you're going to want to miss. Moo, do you want to try and play it again and see if it works with the audio this time?
I'd love to hear how, from your experience, are the UWC students perceived by admissions officers?
Of course. So it takes a special kind of student to want to be involved in the UWC community. In many cases, if you're a boarding student, you may be pretty far from home. And if you're not a boarding student, you're committing to a life of a community that's going to be different than what you would be engaged with in public school. The students are also taking on, a set of academic opportunities that are very, very different within the IB that they might have experienced otherwise. So they're committing to a track where they're not, they're really focusing on a specific set of subjects. They have the theory of knowledge, of course, which is going to be, encapsulating a lot of what they're doing. But in addition, they're engaged in this community opportunity, whatever the school may be focusing on. Would it be the environment? Would it be community building? Would it be looking towards global peace, for example? And whatever it is that each individual school finds as their focus is really going to be expected of the student as well. I mentioned difficult conversations, being in school with people that are very, very different than you, having to express who you are as an individual and meet people that you might not understand at the beginning, or you think you have nothing in common with, and finding common ground. So from my perspective, UWC does an incredible job of educating young people, not only academically, but really in how to dive in and be fully present one-on-one and understand what it's like to be a contributing member of a society. So that I think is really important and pretty unusual, to find 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds undergoing that kind of experience, adults won't occur, not necessarily occur until they're older, sort of in their 20s, and living with people maybe that they haven't encountered before. So I think that the UWC is particularly good at that. In addition, of course, to the rigor of the academic program, it's the mission of the school, and I know, for your school as well, to become stewards of the environment. It's such an incredible thing for these young people to be able to participate in and to understand it. And I have no doubt, with the recent climate discussions in Glasgow, that was probably something that was very much discussed in the classrooms and the hallways and the playing fields, because this is part of the mission of what, you guys are educating for the young people. So, and the last thing I'll say on the subject is that when I had the opportunity to interview students from UWC, I was inevitably blown out of the water. Articulate, thoughtful, self-aware, able to hold a conversation. And, interviews for undergraduate admissions, well, these days they're on Zoom, but in the old days, before times, they were one-on-one in person. And, they didn't know me, but to be able to express who they were, what really mattered to them, to ask me thoughtful questions, those were some of the best interview days I had. And I'm so grateful to have met those young people, because I feel like they are now becoming the leaders of the next generation, hands down, something that I felt really strongly about from the beginning.
Such a beautiful thing here to hear Judith say the same thing that you had just shared, Len, that it's such a pleasure to be in the lives of these young people. And I think for me as a head of school, and I'm sure for all of you on the call, whether you're a student yourself or a parent or a teacher or a counselor, it is just such a privilege to be a part of any aspect of the journey of our young people moving on into young adulthood. So I hope you found a lot of good information from our webinar today. As I've said before, the recording of today's webinar will be saved and will be shared with you in a follow-up email. So I encourage you to watch it again. Feel free as well to contact us here at UWC Thailand if you have any interest in directly reaching out to any of our speakers on the webinar call today. We're happy to support in any way we can, and just really, really grateful for everyone taking the time to join us here today. So thank you, Ellie David. Thank you, Len Peters. Thank you to our wonderful students and to our speaker who joined us on video, Judith. We're very appreciative, and to all of you for taking the time. We hope to see you at our next webinar and to see you out there in the university seeking world. All the best to everyone. Thanks so much, everyone.